In this module, we'll take a look at our first E of modern work culture, evolution. To better understand where the future of work is headed, we're going to start by taking a look at the pros of remote work as well as the cons. Now, up until this point, the key triggers for any type of change in the workplace have been due to technology or the people actually occupying the workforce. And because of this, the new normal of working from home was already well on its way. It just came 10 years earlier than experts predicted. In fact, 53% of global professionals worked remotely for at least half the week in 2018. And between the years 2007 and 2017, we saw an increase of 159% in remote work. Now, taking a closer look at the telecommuting timeline, we can see that the concept emerged back in the 1970s, and over the 50 years was further accelerated by technology and various government initiatives. Now, of course, technology played a pivotal role in this timeline, but we'd be remiss not to look at the role that millennials played as well. We all know that millennials want more flexibility when it comes to their careers, and 89% of them would actually choose more flexibility over a pay raise. But it's not just millennials that want that flexibility now. We're seeing this across all generations. Last year, I introduced the concept of Flexpectation. This is the modern employee's right to choose when and where they're getting their work done. Now, interestingly enough, when the pandemic hit, people again were left with no choice. They were forced to work from home. And as I've mentioned, it wasn't actually the disaster that so many people predicted. Now, this wasn't the first time that many organizations dipped their toes in the world of remote work. Over the past decade, we've seen dozens of organizations, especially in the tech space, launch their own working from home initiatives. Now, interestingly enough, these initiatives were quite short-lived. Business leaders and managers, they couldn't actually trust that their employees were doing their work because they couldn't see them doing their work. But at the end of the day, this is all about engagement and doesn't really have anything to do with where someone is physically doing the work. In fact, over the course of the pandemic, many studies have shown that there has been an uptick in productivity. McKinsey found that 41% of employees say that they're actually more productive now than they had been before the pandemic, while 28% say that they are just as productive. And it's research like this that has really led to the narrative of the office being dead and no longer serving a relevant purpose in the future of the workplace. In the Insight permanent remote work, we can see that many companies are allowing their employees to continue to work remotely once the pandemic is behind us. Now, whether they call it digital by default or remote first, we're seeing companies such as Google and Apple extending the work from home flexibility until at least September 2021, while other companies like Twitter have decided to make the shift permanent. Now, there are many advantages when you look at a completely virtual workplace. First and foremost, you can save a lot of money. A typical employer can save around $11,000 per employee who works remotely half the time. And a remote model, of course, accommodates those individuals who have since left urban cities. In New York alone, apartments are up for rent 85%. The pandemic has left people really reconsidering the type of lifestyle they want to have. And of course, we know that a remote model will better accommodate gig workers who will be able to apply for so many more roles, but this also benefits employers who will have better access to more expertise. In the Insight Digital Nomad, we can see how countries in Europe and the Caribbean are making it easier than ever for people to completely relocate while still keeping their jobs. This is especially appealing to individuals who may not have families yet and who still prioritize traveling and having those new experiences. But at the end of the day, we have to admit that working remotely takes on many sizes, many shapes, and many circumstances. It wasn't necessarily what we all predicted it would be. From the constant and unpredictable interruptions to what has felt like never-ending stress and anxiety. Working from home has not been a walk in the park for everyone, and the challenges have been very, very real. Whether it be a lack of proper office space, or trying to juggle all of our personal obligations, and that burnout and loneliness that has seemed to really build up. Working from home presents many challenges that we weren't necessarily prepared for or want to continue navigating. Interestingly enough, millennials have reported the highest levels of stress and sleeplessness than any other generation, specifically more so when compared to their Gen X or baby boomer counterparts. 75% of people are actually eager to return to their physical office space. They're really missing that in-office interaction with colleagues and even people who they consider to be their friends. Now, even before the recent restrictions were put back in place in Europe, much of the countries there had actually returned to their physical offices. In France alone, we saw that 84% of French workers were back at their desks, while that number was at 40% in the UK. But the question remains, how are employees safely returning to a physical office while the pandemic is far from over? We're seeing that many offices are prioritizing the essential workers who need to go back, so they're keeping it at around 10 to 30% capacity. But we're also seeing organizations encourage employees to return who actually want to go back, those who are doing it on a volunteer basis. We're also seeing co-working spaces being leveraged in a really big way again. Many employers don't want to deal with the logistics or the headaches of having everyone safely return, so they're hiring these co-working spaces to take care of everything and provide those spaces for those employees who might need more space. And of course, we will see offices continue to reduce and repurpose their office spaces to really prepare for that post-pandemic era. Despite all of this, Kate Lister, who is the president of Global Workplace Analytics, she believes that our best estimate is that 25 to 30% of the workforce will be working from home multiple days a week by the end of 2021. Now, we're all hoping that the pandemic is behind us at that point, but we're still seeing people wanting that flexibility. And for many, partial remote work will no longer be the exception, but the expectation. And so we see many organizations looking forward to embracing a hybrid model, where employees will work partially at home and partially in office. Now, in order for this hybrid model to be effective for your organization, you'll need to consider what remote policies you'll have and what in-office policies you'll have. These will both need to be robust for this model to be successful. Now, your remote policies, these will likely target work that is more independent, that will allow people to continue to tend to their personal needs, but it will also really need to be defined what these hours are. When do these employees need to be online and accessible to their colleagues and leaders? Now, those in-office policies, they're also going to change a bit. They're going to target that work that is very collaborative, those in-office brainstorms, possibly for onboarding and training new hires, and of course for that team bonding and those team socials. We also will see offices in downtown centers undergo drastic transformation. Some of those changes will include organizations that will set up independent and reserve-only areas, but we'll also probably see staggered arrival and departure. And we might also see some hubs being created throughout the city for other people to more easily access if they're commuting in. At the end of the day, though, organizations will be better off preparing for how they can become more versatile and agile, as opposed to planning for one specific outcome. So some considerations for the Recharted workplace. The physical office is definitely not dead, but it's going to look a little bit different. Companies will need to develop robust in-office and remote policies to really ensure that that hybrid model can be implemented effectively. And access to talent is going to look a lot different, and it's going to be much less one-size-fits-all. That wraps up our module on evolution. Some homework questions for you to consider. Imagine a hybrid work model as your organization's future. What does it look like? Not only for your immediate team, but for your company at large. And how can you prepare for a future in which more lockdowns might take place?